Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you very much.
May we please call Miss Sewell?
Yeah.
After me, I do solemnly.
I do solemnly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take your time.
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly
Declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Sit down.
Thank you.
Ms. Sewell, I appreciate this may be upsetting for you. Ms. Price will ask you a number of questions in a proper and sensible manner. But if at any time you feel you need a break, just let me know, all right?
Thank you, sir.
Could you confirm your full name, please, Miss Sewell?
Lesley Jessie Sewell.
Thank you for coming to the inquiry to assist it in its work. As you know, my name is Emma Price, and I ask you questions on behalf of the inquiry. You should have in front of you a hard copy of your witness statement. Do you have that?
Yes.
It is dated the 16th of April 2024, and if you could turn to page 41 of that document, please.
Yes,
Is that your signature?
it is.
Are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
That witness statement, for which the reference is WITN 008-40100, is now in evidence and will be published on the inquiry's website in due course. I'd like to start, please, with your professional background and the roles that you held at the Post Office.
Yes.
As you set out in your statement, your bachelor's degree was in applied computing,
That's right.
and you then completed an MBA.
That's right.
You started your career as a trainee computer operator in Newcastle Polytechnic's computing department, is that right?
I did.
Then from 1985 to 2010, you worked for Northern Rock.
I did.
Is it right that all of your roles at Northern Rock were in IT?
That's correct.
You started as a trainee programmer and your final role was managing director of IT.
That's correct.
You say in your statement that in your 25 years at Northern Rock, you led many major IT programs. What did leading such programs involve?
So I led programs, for a good example of that would be a full rollout of a workflow solution across the whole of the business. So I would take a leading role in that, in sponsoring them.
Whilst you were at Northern Rock, were you ever involved in developing, overseeing or developing or managing any electronic point of sale systems?
The only systems would have been branch systems.
And the same question in relation to accounting systems.
Yes, finance and treasury systems.
And you joined the Post Office in April 2010, is that right?
That's correct.
And your role when you joined was Head of IT and Change.
That's correct.
Who did you report to in that role?
Mike Young.
Whose position at the time was?
I believe it was Chief Operating Officer.
You say in your statement you were head of IT until the first or second quarter of 2012, when you were asked to be interim Chief Operating Officer after Mike Young's departure. Is that right?
That's correct.
And roughly how long did you remain in that interim role?
It was for a very short period. I think probably between 3 and 5 months maximum.
When you took up that interim role, did you become part of the executive committee?
Yes, I did.
And by the end of 2012, you had taken up the role of Chief Information Officer, is that right?
Yes.
Did you remain on the Executive Committee as Chief Information Officer?
I did until the end of 2014.
And what happened at the end of 2014 that meant you were no longer on the Executive Committee?
There was a restructure, and we had a group executive which was created.
As Chief Information Officer, you were initially reporting to Sue Barton, the Post Office Strategy Director, is that right?
That's correct.
Until she left at the end of 2013, after which time you reported to the Chief Financial Officer, Chris Day.
That's correct.
At paragraph 9 of your statement, you set out a number of additional responsibilities for information security, which you took on from late 2013 into 2014. And these included commissioning a Deloitte maturity review to inform the information security operating model.
That's right.
Was this Deloitte review the Project Zebra review that you have referred to elsewhere in your statement?
No, it wasn't. It was completely separate.
Okay. Can you help a little bit with what that maturity review involved?
It was basically looking at current responsibilities and scope for information security, and looking at what was in place and determining on a standard information security maturity model where Post Office actually sat on that.
You have identified members of your team when you were Chief Information Officer at paragraph 10 of your statement. Could we have that on screen, please? It's page 6 of the statement. And here you say this: as CIO, I brought in an experienced IT program lead, transformation director Neil Wilkinson, who was responsible for delivering separation, and then more broadly the IT transformation, procurements and delivery. I also brought in a chief technology officer, Paul Bleasby, who led the architecture team and was the chief architect of Post Office Limited's IT systems. He worked closely with third-party suppliers, including Fujitsu, and the wider business on developing the IT strategy and delivering aspects of the IT transformation programme. I would rely on Paul for technical input. David Hulbert, am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's correct.
Was the existing head of service, responsible for the day-to-day operations of all the IT services, including Horizon. All directly reported to me, in addition to a head of business relationships, head of quality and standards, head of managed services, and head of projects. Did you have regular meetings with your direct reports?
Yes.
And how often would you meet with them?
From memory, I think weekly.
You say in your statement at paragraph 6 that you became operations director in addition to Chief Information Officer, following a restructure in early 2015.
That's correct.
And from that point, you reported to the new Chief Financial Officer, Alistair Cameron.
Yes.
Whilst reporting to Alistair Cameron in 2015, you took on the additional responsibility of back office activities for product and branch accounting and HR, is that right?
That's correct.
And you left the Post Office in November 2015, following your resignation in early June 2015.
That's correct.
Turning please to the substance of your roles with the Post Office, you describe your first role, the head of IT and change role, at paragraph 7. That's page 3. And you say, on joining Pol, my understanding was that I had been brought in to oversee the separation from RMG, and the resulting IT transformation, and to build the IT capability post-separation. Further down this paragraph, about 5 lines up from the bottom, you say this: my objective was, with the support of the executives and the board, to build a holistic IT strategy for separation. Horizon and the relationship with Fujitsu was one part of the overall IT strategy. Focusing first on what you were told about Horizon when you took up the Head of IT and Change role in 2010, could we go please to paragraph 12 of the statement? That's page 7. And you say here, I had no knowledge of Horizon before joining Post Office Limited, other than at the interview stage being told about key suppliers, including Fujitsu. On joining Post Office Limited, I learned more detail about Fujitsu building Horizon, and that the contract had been in place since the 1990s. I understood Horizon to be the point of sale system at the post office counters, SPMs, crowns and multiples, which would be used to process and record all transactions performed within a branch. I cannot recall any of the specific details, but during my first few weeks at Post Office Limited, it is likely that I would have been given a walkthrough of Horizon, and it is possible that some high-level architectural presentations regarding Horizon were delivered to me. Beyond this, the only formal training on Horizon I recall was a specific type of training, which was limited training on Horizon, and more specifically the Post and Go machines. At the end of this paragraph, you say, I would have had a high-level awareness about how the system was architected. However, as head of IT, Chief Information Officer, I was neither a technical nor functional expert in Horizon. Who was it who briefed you about the history of the Horizon system when you joined the Post Office?
So I believe it would have been a head of architecture at the time was David Gray.
And who was it who gave you the walkthrough of Horizon?
It's likely to have been him, although I can't recall any specifics, I'm sorry.
You say at the end of the paragraph that you were neither a technical nor a functional expert in Horizon, but as a former programmer with your background in numerous IT roles, would you agree in general terms that you had the relevant expertise to understand technical issues which might and did arise from the operation of the Horizon system?
At a level, yes, but deep technical knowledge, I would not have had that.
In general terms, do you think that the IT function within the Post Office was adequately resourced with staff with appropriate expertise?
When I started, no.
Can you help with why you say no?
It was quite a small operation, and they were heavily dependent upon Royal Mail at the time.
And did that change?
It did change over time. It starts through the transformation. That was one of the key tenets to build the capability within that team.
What were the implications of the IT function not being adequately resourced with staff with appropriate expertise?
So the IT function when I joined was very much, I would describe as a change function. So they dealt mainly with change activity. And again, when I started, the operational management of Fujitsu in particular and the links back into Royal Mail sat within another part of Mike Young's area, which was under Andy McLean.
You deal with where the responsibility for the day-to-day operational service management of Horizon and the management of the contractual relationship with Horizon lay at paragraph 8 of your statement. Could we go to that, please? It's page 4. You say here, initially during my tenure as head of IT and change, the day-to-day operational service management of Horizon and the management of the contractual relationship with Fujitsu was the responsibility of the managed services team. Andy McLean led this team and reported into the Chief Operating Officer, Mike Young. Managed services at this time was also responsible for the management and oversight of the outsourced business activities and relationships, e.g. Bank of Ireland, HP, telephony. As head of IT and change, insofar as Horizon was concerned, I had responsibility for any IT change activity, i.e. introduction of the post and go machines. If there were any significant incidents, i.e. a P1 or a P2, as I refer to below at paragraph 18, the IT team would be involved to support any investigations into the incidents. You say you raised with Mike Young that the responsibility for the operational management and contractual relationship management of the Horizon contract was in the wrong part of Post Office Limited and should have been under IT. You say, as I've set out above, if there was a significant incident involving Horizon, the managed services team supported by the separate IT team would work together to investigate. The issue with this was that the IT team did not have full oversight of Horizon, the contractual relationship with Fujitsu and day-to-day management. Pausing there, what were the potential repercussions of the IT function not having full oversight of Horizon?
So coming from Northern Rock, where I had full oversight of the operational side as well as change, this was very different, and certainly from my perspective, I didn't have a full view of the whole IT landscape, and I didn't feel at the time that there was sufficient oversight in terms of looking at that particular contract itself.
Were there any specific incidents which led to you forming this view?
I think we'll probably come to this, but certainly the audits.
And what aspects of the audits?
One, so these are the E&Y audits. The first part, nobody had taken ownership for the audits, which was, I suppose that's the main point. Nobody had actually taken ownership of the audits.
You go on, this changed when the head of managed services left in Q3, Q4 2011. From that point on, as head of IT and change, I took responsibility for service management, which included Horizon, the contractual relationship with Fujitsu, and day-to-day management. So by the third or fourth quarter of 2011, you had responsibility for service management, and that included the day-to-day management and the contractual relationship management. Is that right?
That's correct.
Prior to this, you had responsibility only for IT change activity and providing support if there were significant incidents graded as P1 or P2, which required investigation. You define the P1 and P2 gradings at paragraph 18 of your statement. P1s, you say, were a complete Horizon network outage, and P2s were technical issues affecting a significant number of branches.
Yes,
is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Looking, please, to paragraph 19 of the statement, towards the bottom of the page. You describe here the process for dealing with technical issues relating to Horizon. And you say this: prior to my taking responsibility for service management in Q3, Q4 2011, it was the responsibility of the managed services team to inform me of these issues and engage with the IT team. In some cases, these issues would be escalated to the executive. An incident review would then be carried out by Fujitsu, who would provide a written response to Post Office Limited. Any significant issues would be discussed at the operational and executive supplier reviews with Fujitsu. I understood that operational reviews took place between Fujitsu and service management every week. I was not involved in these meetings. It is my understanding that executive reviews were not taking place prior to me taking responsibility for service management. Once I'd taken responsibility, I attended executive meetings either monthly or bi-monthly, depending on the need, with my senior team, a Fujitsu account executive, sales executive, and service executive. You say that David Hulbert or the duty manager would communicate P1s and P2s to all key stakeholders across the business, keeping them updated. And you would assist in communicating P1s and P2s at executive level, often by text message, telephone call, or in person. Should the chair understand from this paragraph that you did not at any point, when you were head of IT and change, attend the weekly operational service management review meetings between Fujitsu and the post office?
That's correct, I didn't.
And that's both before and after taking on responsibility for service management?
Yeah, that's correct.
Given your role within the business as head of IT, do you think you ought to have attended at least some of those meetings in order to understand the detail of the operation of Horizon, including issues which might be negatively affecting sub-postmasters?
Typically, as head of IT or CIO, you would not attend the weekly meetings. And that would be largely because the executive meetings that were there, if there was anything in particular that would need to be escalated or even escalated outside of those meetings.
As challenges to the integrity of the Horizon system came into greater focus, did you consider attending these meetings personally?
I didn't, because my this sounds awful. My priorities were very much about separation, and I had to trust my team, who were the experts, to escalate anything to me.
Were you personally involved in any investigation into significant incidents?
I wouldn't say investigate. I would receive incident reviews, and out of those incident reviews, there would certainly, and I can't recall specifics, but there would certainly be detailed discussions about those incidents themselves, and certainly the resolution of those incidents.
Did anyone from the post office IT team have any direct involvement in the investigation of significant incidents?
The service management team would have done.
And what part would they play in investigations?
So they would work very closely with Fujitsu on the incidents themselves, and in particular to understand the detail. I think also, and again this is just from memory, typically you would get the architects, the chief architect involved in that as well, so that they could understand the low-level detail.
Going please to page 7 of the statement and paragraph 14. Towards the bottom of the page. You say, around the time I joined Post Office Limited in April 2010, I recall that the second iteration of Horizon, HNGX, was in the process of being rolled out. I understood that the changes were primarily as a result of a cost reduction exercise, a refresh of some of the hardware, and application changes to support sub-postmasters. Who was it who explained to you the reasons behind the change to Horizon Online?
I believe that would have been Mike Young, and potentially, as I've said previously, the chief architect, which was David Gray at the time.
You go on, I later understood that there was a level of resilience removed as part of the HNGX rollout. Previously, branches could continue to operate if the branch was unable to connect to the data centre. However, HNGX required the branches to be connected to the data centre to be operational. Coming from a banking background where branches could continue to transact if they lost connectivity to the database, I had concerns about this from an operational resilience perspective, i.e. customers could not be provided with services if branches lost connectivity. And you say this issue was addressed in papers to the board. Those two documents that you reference there are from 2012, by which time you were the interim chief operating officer. Is that right?
That's right.
Had the concern about operational resilience developed prior to taking up that role? In other words, when you were still head of IT?
It had, and at the time I'd raised it with Mike Young.
Was that before or after you took on responsibility for Horizon System day-to-day operation management?
I can't recall specifically, I'm sorry.
That can come down. Did you consider at the time, when you became concerned about operational resilience, whether this feature of Horizon Online, that is, branch inability to transact if they lost connectivity to the data centre, had any implications for the accuracy of the branch transactions recorded by the system?
No, I didn't.
Do you think you should have considered that?
The way that the technology worked, and if a branch couldn't connect to the data centre because of a material outage, they couldn't transact.
Moving then to your executive roles, the interim chief operating officer role and then the chief information officer role, accompanied in 2015 by the operations director role. What did you understand your accountabilities to the chief executive officer to be?
My accountabilities to the chief executive officer. So I was responsible for, I suppose there was key things that I was responsible for. Delivering separation, delivering transformation, and the IT service.
Did you recognise at the time that identifying, analysing and managing risk was a fundamental part of your executive responsibilities?
Sorry, yes.
Would you accept that in order to discharge your responsibilities in relation to risk as an executive, you needed to be proactive and curious about possible risk areas?
Yes.
Where you identified a risk when carrying out your executive roles, what were the mechanisms in place for you to raise that risk with the chief executive officer?
So my reporting line was typically through another executive, not directly to the chief executive. So if there were any risks, I would raise that with my line manager, who changed over time, so that could get raised through to the chief executive.
Do you consider that the culture at the post office was supportive of executives reporting concerns about risk to the chief executive officer?
I think it was. I think that probably latterly, I would say that there was a focus on risk. I think when I joined, I don't believe there was, because I asked for a risk register when I joined, and there wasn't one for IT, which had to be built.
When you took on the role as Chief Information Officer, you became the executive accountable for the contractual relationship with Fujitsu in respect of Horizon, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Which you say at paragraph 9 of your statement included overall oversight of any change activity and provision of operational service from Fujitsu.
Yes.
Do you think your colleagues at executive level relied upon your IT expertise to assist in their own response to issues involving the Horizon system?
I would expect so, but also my team as well.
You addressed discussions about the future use of Horizon at the Post Office at paragraph 66 of your statement. Could we have that on screen, please? It's page 32. And about halfway down the page, you say, I took a lead role in any discussions regarding the future use of Horizon at Post Office Limited, and therefore have a clear recollection about this topic. These discussions took place throughout my tenure, and it was a constantly evolving process. As set out above at paragraph 7, I was accountable for Post Office Limited's IT strategy post-separation, with approval at executive and board level. I would have taken in views from all key stakeholders across the business about the IT strategy, including the future use of Horizon, and would have ensured it aligned with Post Office Limited's business strategy. From early on in my tenure, it was clear that the legal team had concerns about the Fujitsu contract, as it was originally formed in the 1990s and had never been out to public tender. It was therefore difficult to assess its value for money, particularly from a public purse perspective. I also recall concerns from other business stakeholders, i.e. marketing and retail, about how user-friendly Horizon was and the time it took to change when introducing business changes. In addition, technology had moved on significantly since Horizon was introduced. These concerns were continually raised and discussed throughout my tenure. Did you consider sub-postmasters to be stakeholders when you took up your head of IT and change role?
Yes.
How did you obtain their views on the future use of Horizon?
I can't recall specifically. I would think that, again, I can't recall specifically. I don't want to guess.
Or can you recall at all how their views came to you?
I can. So I know I did take time to visit some of the branches, and I think, especially when we got into the latest strategy, looking at the replacement of Horizon, I can remember. I've got a vague memory of pulling together some forum to take in input from the stakeholders, so postmasters, but I'm really struggling to remember.
Turning please to paragraph 72 of the statement, that's page 36. Do you say any reviews of Horizon with regards to security and stability that had taken place over the previous years would have fed into the procurements and were considered? With this in mind, I'd like to look, please, at the first review relating to the Horizon system on which you were cited when you took up the head of IT and change role, and that document is the Rod Ismay report. You say at paragraph 16 of your statement that you received a copy of this due to your role as head of IT shortly after you started with the Post Office, and you were in fact copied into Mr. Ismay's report on the 2nd of August 2010. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
That can come down now, thank you. And you say it was around this time that you first understood that there were challenges to the integrity of Horizon.
Yes.
Could we have the ISME report on screen, please? The reference is POL 000-26572. We can see here the title, Horizon, Response to Challenges Regarding Systems Integrity. The date is the 2nd of August 2010. It was sent by Mr. Ismay, who was head of product and branch accounting at the time. Did you understand at the time you received this report that product and branch accounting were involved in recovering apparent shortfalls in accounts from sub-postmasters?
I didn't appreciate that at that time. It was quite early on in my tenure at Post Office.
Looking at the to list, it's to Dave Smith, Managing Director, Mike Moores, Finance Director, Mike Young, Chief Technical and Services Officer. You are the third on the copy list as Head of IT. Did you read the report in full when it was sent to you?
I believe I did.
The introduction reads as follows. Post Office Limited has, over the years, had to dismiss and prosecute a number of sub-postmasters and Crown staff following financial losses in branches. A small number of these have made counterclaims that they were not guilty of the charges made, but that the Horizon system was faulty. Various lobby groups have been set up by former sub-postmasters, and these have at times received national media coverage, and in some cases have been taken up by local MPs. Most recently, Channel 4 has proposed a news article about this area. This paper has been compiled as an objective, internal review of Post Office Limited's processes and controls around branch accounting. It includes an overview of Post Office Limited's control environment and Post Office Limited's response to accounting errors, IT systems, Horizon versus Horizon Online, and resolution of known issues, third-party perspectives, court judgments, media and audit, and statistics on branch accounting issues, suspensions and prosecutions. Pausing there, at the time, did it strike you as odd that this review, done by someone from within the Post Office, the head of product and branch accounting, was being described as objective?
I can't remember what I thought at the time.
What was your understanding at the time of why Mr. Ismay was preparing this report, rather than a Post Office employee with IT expertise?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, but I can only guess and assume that it was because Rod had a huge amount of experience across the business and understood the controls that sat around the system. I also, and again, I'm trying to remember, and I can't remember because I wasn't involved in this part, but I think some of the IT architects might have been included in this to provide input to it.
What did you understand to be the reason for this report having been produced?
I didn't know the reason why it was produced.
Before we go to the executive summary of the report, could we look please to page 19 of this document? Under 4C, independent review and audit angles, we have this. Post Office Limited has actively considered the merits of an independent review. This has been purely from the perspective that we believe in Horizon, but that a review could help give others the same confidence that we have. Our decision between IT, Legal, PB&A, Security and Press Office has continued to be that no matter what opinions we obtain, people will still ask what if, and the defence will always ask questions that require answers beyond the report. Further, such a report would only have merit as at the date of creation and would have to be updated at the point at which Horizon or the numerous component platforms were upgraded. You had by this point been head of IT for around 4 months, having taken up the role in April. Were you the IT representative who contributed to the decision not to commission an independent review?
No, I wasn't.
Do you know who was?
I don't know who was.
Going over the page, please. The first paragraph here reads, "It is also important to be crystal clear about any review if one were commissioned. Any investigation would need to be disclosed in court. Although we would be doing the review to comfort others, any perception that Post Office Limited doubts its own systems would mean that all criminal prosecutions would have to be stayed. It would also beg a question for the Court of Appeal over past prosecutions and imprisonments." Did you read this part of the report when you received it?
I can't recall if I did.
Do you recall having any concern about the description here, that the investigation would need to be disclosed in court, and a worry about that?
I think at this point I didn't really understand how Post Office was prosecuting sub-postmasters, because I just didn't have line of sight of this, and I can't remember reading this at this detail at the time.
Going back then, please, to page 1 of the document, the executive summary. The first 3 paragraphs say this: "The allegations to which we are responding follow on from cases where thousands of pounds were missing at audit. We remain satisfied that this money was missing due to theft in the branch. We do not believe the account balances against which the audits were conducted were corrupt. Post Office Limited has extensive controls spanning systems, processes, training and support. Horizon is robust, but like any system, depends on the quality of entries by the users. Horizon Online builds on this and brings benefits to running costs and change management. It is not being done because of any doubt about the integrity of Horizon. The integrity of Horizon is founded on its tamper-proof logs, its real-time backups, and the absence of backdoors, so that all data entry or acceptance is at branch level and is tagged against the log of the ID of the user. This means that ownership of the accounting is truly at branch level." And then over the page, please, second paragraph down. "Accounting errors do happen through user mistakes, but these can be explained and resolved case by case. Systems issues have also arisen, but again, Post Office Limited has been able to explain them and rectify them. Whilst they have affected the availability and functionality of the system, with consequent impacts on customers and clients, they do not bring the integrity of the system into question. Then when Post Office Limited takes a sub-postmaster to court, we have strong processes for the compilation of evidence, compassionate factors are borne in mind, and we have a high success rate. This does depend on ensuring that the courts focus on the facts of transaction logs and not on speculation about the what-ifs." Would you agree that it is quite clear from both the introduction to this report and the last paragraph that I've just read out from the executive summary that sub-postmasters were being prosecuted and dismissed in reliance on Horizon data? Setting aside for a second the question of who was doing the prosecuting.
Yes, that's how it reads.
You say at paragraph 31 of your statement that you understood from the ISMAE report that Horizon data was being used as part of the supporting evidence in prosecutions and the importance of the integrity of the data. Is that right?
Yes.
But you say you do not recall appreciating that Post Office could prosecute individuals itself without referral to external authorities. And you say you didn't realise that until around the time of the second site review. looking at that introduction and the penultimate paragraph here, the one I've just read out, on the executive summary, on the face of the document, wasn't it quite clear that not only were sub-postmasters being prosecuted in reliance on Horizon data, they were being prosecuted by the Post Office?
At the time when I've read, I don't recall thinking that Post Office prosecuted postmasters at that time. It was really not until the time of the second site report that I really started to understand and appreciate it, because I just wasn't close enough to that at this time.
Looking, please, to some of the detail around systems issues which were raised in Mr. Ismay's report. Page 3 of the document, please. Under 1A systems, the second paragraph in the box says failures in systems and file transfer do happen, but Post Office Limited has controls to detect these. The frequency of file transfer failures has been unacceptably high recently and is a top priority for IT. What did you understand by systems and file transfer failures at the time?
I wouldn't have understood anything about that at the time, because that's an operational issue, and that sat within a separate line, which was Andy McLean.
And that was managed services, was it?
That was managed services.
So were you not aware that the frequency of file transfer failures was a top priority for IT, that is your team, at the time?
I wouldn't have been, and the likelihood is I think it would have all been within the operational side. And it says IT, but I don't recall anything to do with this.
Shouldn't someone have told you that this was a top priority for IT, the frequency of file transfer failures?
If it was, so if someone in my team was dealing with it, yes. But that looks as if it's an operational issue.
So you read this report. What did you think when you saw that this was a top priority for IT?
I really don't recall specifically reading this point.
Going please to page 6. Under the second bullet point, there is a heading, IT systems, interventions and response to outages, disconnections. And the bullet point under that reads, incomplete transactions. Systems could fail or lines could be disconnected during online banking transactions. This could mean that customer money has changed hands without the system being updated or vice versa. IT controls would detect these outages and raise recovery alerts to the branch, such that the branch can check and update the accounts if needed. This has been a more frequent issue recently with screen freezes and POCA outages, but recovery instructions have been issued to branches and enable them to deal with any issues. Given that this report was being produced in the context of challenges to Horizon integrity, raised in the context of prosecutions of sub-postmasters, and those prosecutions were said to rely on transaction logs, did this paragraph in the report concern you at all?
I don't recall reading this in detail. No, sorry. I just don't recall what action I did or didn't take out of this report.
Was your team asked by Mr. Ismay to comment on the impact of the systems issues referred to in the report on the integrity of the data being produced by the system?
If I recall correctly, David Gray, who was the chief architect. He worked closely with Rod Ismay on this report.
Going please to page 17 of this document. The section on third-party comment. Under 4A, court decisions, the first two paragraphs read as follows. There have been cases when taken to court by Post Office Limited where the defence has claimed that the accounting system Horizon was at fault and that there were incidents such as ghost transactions or electrical supply issues which have corrupted the Horizon records. With two notable exceptions, Post Office Limited has been able to rebut these assertions by ensuring a focus on the facts of the Horizon transaction logs and a request for the defence to be specific about which transactions they consider to be ghost and why. One of the notable exceptions is addressed about halfway down this page. Point 1, Cleveley's, 2001. It explains sub-post mistress dismissed in 2001, soon after Horizon was introduced. The defence produced a report which showed how Horizon could have caused an error, and Post Office Limited did not have the audit transaction logs to refute the claim. Do you recall reading about this reference to a report which showed how Horizon could have caused an error?
I don't.
That should have worried you, shouldn't it, as head of IT, that there was a report out there saying that Horizon could have caused an error?
I think if I recall correctly, at the time of this report, I'm sure I would have had some discussions with the chief architect. And a lot of these issues were seen as legacy issues to do with old Horizon. At the time, I just can't, I'm really struggling to recall this report at the start of, 3 months after I joined. I'm really struggling to remember this in detail because, again, I'd come in just very much to focus on separation, and some of these issues in here were operational issues.
Well, you've explained how, looking forwards, this would have been seen as a legacy Horizon issue. But looking backwards for a moment in the context of a report raising challenges to Horizon integrity, did you consider the implications for those who had been prosecuted based on Horizon legacy data?
At the time, I really didn't understand. I mean, obviously now you'd look at it in a different light altogether. But at the time, I didn't really appreciate the legal process, and from a legal perspective, that wouldn't be for me to comment.
Going back, please, to the executive summary, page 2. The second paragraph down, which we've already read out. Page 2, please. The summary in that second paragraph relating to systems issues, that they have arisen, but again, Post Office Limited has been able to explain them and rectify them. There's a very short conclusion. Whilst they have affected the availability and functionality of the system with consequent impacts on customers and clients, they do not bring the integrity of the system into question. You say in your statement that you took Mr. Ismay's report at face value, but having read the report, given your knowledge and background in IT, were you not concerned to better understand Mr. Ismay's logic and conclusion?
So I can't comment for what Mr. Ismay has said, but from an IT perspective, if there is an issue or a fault, the important points are always to understand what the issue is, rectify the issue, and that would maintain, in my mind, the integrity of the system. So as long as you know what it is, you know how to resolve it, and you do the appropriate post-incident reviews, and you've got full sight of all of the data and the facts, that should retain that.
What questions did you ask and of whom when you read the report?
I really can't remember. I'm sorry.
Did you consider the processes which were in place to ensure that product and branch accounting, contract managers and those involved in criminal investigations and prosecutions were kept informed about any systems issues which had the potential to impact on transactions data?
So I wouldn't be able to comment at that time because communication would have been through service management.
When you were head of IT, was there a central repository within the Post Office for information about P1 and P2 incidents, which could be accessed by other departments and teams?
There was a process in place called Duty Manager, which basically would inform all key stakeholders across the business.
Did anyone tell you as head of IT or later in your executive roles that the Post Office was bound as a prosecutor to ensure the recording of information of relevance to its prosecutions?
I can't recall specifically.
Did you have any concept when you were in any of your roles at the Post Office that it might be important for the Post Office to record information about IT issues which might affect data upon which it relied to prosecute and take other action?
So from an IT perspective, it's business as usual to maintain information about faults and issues and resolution.
Were there established channels through which information might be requested about technical horizon issues by Post Office lawyers, or was this done on an ad hoc basis?
I'm not sure. Is this, sorry, just to clarify, is this from Fujitsu or is that just from internally within the IT function?
Well, taking it in general terms and being specific, lawyers involved in prosecutions, so initially Royal Mail Group legal lawyers and later Post Office lawyers. In terms of information, was there an established way for them to obtain that information from IT about technical horizon issues?
The only thing I was aware of, and this came very much later once I took over the contract, was a process to get data between the lawyers and I think Fujitsu. In terms of faults and issues, I don't recall anything.
Can I just ask, Ms. Sewell, we've obviously heard a good deal of evidence about the Fujitsu processes for dealing with, I'll just use the word defects. We've heard about peaks and kells, etc. Did the Post Office always go to Fujitsu? In your experience, obviously you can only speak for the time you were there, but if there was something that occurred with the IT system, was it always go to Fujitsu to find the answer, or did you have your own processes for finding the answer, either first, shall we say, or, well, just never mind about first. Did you have your own processes for looking at problems and trying to solve them?
So purely from an IT perspective, because Fujitsu effectively ran the system and they had the IPR effectively, we would always look to go to Fujitsu. The team would work together because you would understand what the business impact was. So what's the business impact to be able to investigate the cause? But the cause would have to be determined by Fujitsu.
All right. And so how would you, the Post Office Limited, ensure that relevant documentation about a particular problem, which was generated by the Post Office, even if it was only to ask Fujitsu to help, how would you ensure that that documentation would be retained and kept for an appropriate period of time?
I think the only thing I would go back to is a retention policy on documents.
Right. So there was a retention policy throughout the period that you were there?
I can't speak for the whole period that I was there, because from what I remember when, and again, I think this is just a vague memory, when I took over information security, that was an area where we did look at, was the retention policy. But I think typically it was something like about 7 years. And I've seen that in some of the documents that are being provided.
And which, was it the IT department itself which had a retention policy, or was it a policy that applied throughout all departments of the business?
So typically you would expect in an organisation, and again, I'm trying to remember, but typically you would have that set, the retention policy wouldn't necessarily be set by IT. That would typically be set by somebody like information security or the data protection officer of the organisation, and that could be within Royal Mail or Post Office. They would set the policy, and then the departments, including IT, should adhere to that policy.
Sorry, Ms. Price, I may have been trespassing on some of your questions, but I just wanted those thoughts out at this time.
We looked earlier at paragraph 19 of your statement, in which you said that P1s and P2s would be communicated to all key stakeholders across the business. Were the investigators, that is the security team, investigators who were criminally investigating sub-postmasters and others, were they considered key stakeholders for those purposes?
I can't remember specifically, but I do think information security was included.
Can you recall whether the relevant legal teams, that is the lawyers involved in prosecutions and debt recovery, were key stakeholders for this purpose, that is the communication of P1s and P2s?
I can't recall who was on that list, but what I can say, if it was a P1 and it was communicated to all of the execs, that would have included those as well.
Having received Mr. Ismay's report, do you think that you as head of IT should have raised the issue of information flow within the Post Office between the relevant teams and departments?
And this is where it's difficult, because at that time, that responsibility lay, although it was under Mike Young, it lay within Andy McLean's area.
When you took up the role as head of IT, did you ask what documentation might be in the Post Office IT department's possession to assist with the role of overseeing IT systems?
Yes, I did.
And what were you told?
I was given, I don't believe I was given a lot of documentation at the time.
Were you given, for example, release notes,
No.
major incident reports?
So the first major incident reports that I would have seen would have been whilst I was CIO.
Did you have any sight of MBSC call records
No, not at all.
or service management documents?
I would have seen a high-level service management, so in terms of service availability, but I think that would have been, so probably end of 2011 into 2012 once I took some responsibility.
Do you think that you should have asked to see more documentation in relation to oversight of the IT system, the
So,
Horizon system?
and when I wasn't responsible, I don't think so. But when I was responsible, I would see documentation and I would see executive summaries. In the role as CIO, you wouldn't get into that level of detail, unfortunately.
I'd like to turn, please, to Post Office awareness of relevant bugs, errors and defects in Horizon following the ISME report. Starting, please, with the receipts and payments mismatch bug. Could we have on screen, please, POL 00294684? This is an email from Antonio Jamasp on the 15th of November 2010. Well, apologies, it relates to a proposed meeting on the 15th of November 2010 to discuss a proposal for receipts and payments resolution. The first invited attendee listed was David Hulbert, who was listed as a required attendee. Was Mr. Hulbert in your team at that time, November 2010? I know he was later a direct report.
No, he wasn't. He reported to me some 12 months later.
Also listed was Ian Trundle. Was he in the Post Office IT department?
I think he may have been an architect.
Did he report to you?
No, he didn't.
The body of the email, if we can scroll down a little, please, contains a summary of the problem explained in the first 3 paragraphs. It says the aim of the meeting is to discuss the working group proposal to resolve discrepancies generated by branches following a specific process during the completion of the trading statement. Service delivery recently became aware of an issue whereby if a certain process was followed during completion of the trading statement, any discrepancy the branch was carrying, either positive or negative, would drop from the Horizon system, but still show within the Credence system. Few branches were aware of the issue, but it creates questions around whether the Horizon system can cause losses or gains. However, it also highlights positives in our management of the system, because once the issue arose, we were able to highlight it, quickly investigated the problem, and then ring-fence the issue while ascertaining a fix to stop it recurring. But it doesn't resolve the issue at branches that already have the issue. On the next page, some solutions are set out, and we'll come back to those in due course. Were you aware of this meeting taking place at the time?
No.
We have a note of the meeting which took place to discuss the issue. Could we have that on screen, please? The reference is FUJ 82110. We do not see Mr. Holbert's name on the list, but we do see Ian Trundle's name listed next to IT. So it appears that he was the representative for IT at this meeting. Would you agree?
Yes.
Also present were representatives from Post Office Service Delivery, Post Office Security, Post Office Network, Post Office Finance, and various representatives from Fujitsu. So it would appear that the receipts and payments mismatch bug was known about across these major relevant departments within the Post Office at the time. Would you agree?
Yes.
Did Mr. Trundle report the outcome of this meeting to you at the time?
I don't recall him speaking to me about it.
Were you sent this note of the meeting?
I don't believe so.
I should be clear about that. Were you sent the note of this meeting at the time in 2010?
I don't believe so. I was.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 2029611? You appear to have been involved in the response to the receipts and payments issue in March 2011. The email starting about halfway down the page is from Will Russell to you, copied to Andy McLean. It appears from the sign-off at the bottom that William Russell was a commercial advisor in the Post Office Service Delivery team. And it's dated the 4th of March 2011. And it reads as follows. The subject is receipts and payments issue. And it says, Lesley, quite a lot of info here, but I will outline what we agreed on this issue. Word documents attached are the letters going out to branches on Monday. They have been approved by legal and PB&A, Andy Wynne, and SD, Tony J. I ran Mike G, Mike Y, and Andy M through the detail last week. We have agreed to write off the losses and repay the gains via sub-postmaster pay. We have a document from Fujitsu on what happened, see PDF file. This provides audit trail and shows what happened for a branch, as well as events generated and logged by Fujitsu, plus what the branch saw on their reports. I'm just awaiting clearance from Network, Anita Turner, re how to approach NFSP, proposed to finalise that on Monday for 62 branches affected as shown on Excel spreadsheet. Matt Hibbert was happy with the process and Fujitsu document as Rod was off. Andy Mack has taken action from Mike Y to ensure we maintain closer links with PB&A Rod. Tony J is already working on issue management and how PB&A raise issues with SD, and this will help SD formally raise and resolve them with Fujitsu. Both Mikes were keen we use this as a positive, e.g. Old Horizon would not have picked this up, yet the logs in data center and event alerting meant we picked this up and can demonstrate through reports what happened. We can generate reports for each branch if challenged. We're writing to branches and following up with call from NBSC, PB&A with walkthrough of the detail as required. We have commitment from Fujitsu to visit any branches to run them through what happened with them. We have had receipt and payments mismatches before, so this is not something new to manage, albeit that this issue was very complicated in how it was reported and evident to the branch. Picking up, first of all, on that last sentence in the penultimate paragraph, we have had receipt and payment mismatches before. Can you help with what this is referring to?
I don't know, I'm sorry.
Did you question at the time what was being referred to here in terms of past receipt and payment mismatches?
I can't recall at all.
But it appears this was not the first time that this type of issue had arisen.
That's what it appears.
This particular receipts and payments mismatch issue had come up around 3 months after Mr. Ismay's report. And you seem to have been involved in the response by March 2011, so 7 months after Mr. Ismay's report. Did this issue cause you to question the conclusions reached by Mr. Ismay in his report at all?
I can't recall that it did, because I really don't recall that it did, because this was being managed separately, and Mike Young's referenced as well, so it wouldn't have registered as a major issue to me at the time.
This particular issue had been resolved with the affected branches.
Yes.
But did you consider what the implications of this were for other branches or past issues that might have arisen where there may have been action taken against a sub-postmaster and others?
I can't recall if I did or didn't.
Did you consider whether information relating to this bug should be shared with those involved in dismissals, contract terminations, prosecutions, and debt recovery?
I wasn't close enough to understand what was happening on that side of the business. And I think this was a major issue with the different responsibilities between operational management and change.
Did you consider at all whether this cast doubt on the reliability of the Horizon transactions data being used in support of action against sub-postmasters and others?
I don't recall that I would have, because it looked as if, on the face of it, the problem had been solved.
This was one of the bugs or defects referred to in the interim second site report, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 2029618? This is an email chain from June 2013.
Mm-hmm.
It is, in it, Ron Warmington is seeking clarification as to whether anyone at board level was aware of the receipts and payments mismatch bug, and if so, who and when.
Yes.
And your email is at the top.
Yeah.
And it's 25th of June 2013 to Simon Baker and Alwyn Lyons. And you say this: Simon, I don't know if it went higher than Mike. Andy Mook also managed the service at the time, and if I remember correctly, Mark Burley was also involved. I can't say whether we said anything to the press. Other points: our board at the time would have been Royal Mail, as we didn't have an independent board. Paula would have been network director at the time, with Dave Smith as MD. Who is the Mike who you're referring to here?
Mike Young.
And Andy Mook, was that Andy McLean?
Yes, that's right.
And Mark Burley, what was his role in 2010 to 11?
He was heading up the rollout of HNGX.
When you were involved in the response to the receipts and payments mismatch bug in March 2011, you were head of IT. Who did you report this issue up to?
The receipts and payments issue.
In March 2011.
March 2011, I didn't report it up to Mike because Mike was already aware of it. Mike Young. So I reported to Mike Young at the time.
Did you report it to anyone else?
I wouldn't have done, because it's the reporting line for operational management and management of faults. was Andy McLean up to Mike. So Mike was well aware of this fault.
Can you help with your comment here about there not being a post office board at the time? Presumably meaning at the time the receipts and payments mismatch bug came to light in 2010.
Yeah, because I think at that time it was prior to separation. So we were still governed by Royal Mail at that time, and I wasn't aware that, and I don't think we had an independent board. There was an executive team, and I think David Smith may have sat on the board at Royal Mail.
Can you help to any greater degree than you have with your comments in this email with how high up the knowledge of the receipts and payments mismatch bug went prior to it being discussed in the context of Second Sight's work in 2013?
I don't know. I gave as much information as I had at the time.
Given your knowledge from the ISME report that Horizon data was being relied upon to dismiss and prosecute individuals, when you first found out about the receipts and payments mismatch bug or bugs, did you consider discussing the potential wider implications of this with product and branch accounting?
I can't recall if I did, because I wasn't actively involved in this particular fault at the time.
Or anyone from Network?
I really wasn't involved in this fault at the time.
So I wonder if that might be a convenient moment for the morning break.
Yes, by all means. So what time should we resume?
I think 10 minutes takes us to 1:15, please, sir.
By my clock, because I'm not really sure we have a full 10 minutes, it's 11:07.
Very happy to come back at 20 past, sir.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, sir. Can you still see and hear us?
Yes, indeed.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 00294852? This is an email chain from September 2011. So at this point, you were still in the head of IT role. Starting, please, with the first email in this chain, dated the 28th of September 2011. That's page 2 of this document. There is an email from Gary Blackburn, just scrolling down, please, who is IT and Change. So was that your team?
Yes. Yeah.
And scrolling up, please. This is to a number of recipients, including you, Dave Holbert, and Alison Bolsover. And the subject is Camelot, missing data in PulseApp. Can you just help with what PulseApp was?
So it was a post office. I don't remember the technicalities of PulseApp, but it was in technical terms it was a SAP system.
Mr. Blackburn explains the issue in this way. Under what has happened, the root cause is still to be determined, but P&BA colleagues have identified that there is data missing within PulseApp. The missing data relates to multiple REMs undertaken on a number of dates in September. The affected transactions are when the REM was for the same product, same value, and completed on the same day. Appears like a duplicated REM. The data is zero value stock data, which is REM in, REM out products such as Camelot scratch cards and MVL tax discs. In total, we have 71 products that are classed as zero value stock data. The impact is because the data is missing within PulseApp, PBA have understandably issued transaction corrections to branches that appear not to have conformed to business process. 309 branches within branch trading group C have received TCs inappropriately. 90 of those branches have complained to PMBA and explained that they will not be processing the TC. So would you agree that Mr. Blackburn appears to be identifying a problem where branch transaction data went missing?
I don't know whether it's branch transactional data.
Can you help with what it is?
Because the branch transactional data would have been held within Horizon, not PulseApp. So that was my understanding.
Looking down to the resolution, Fujitsu are presently working on the identification of the missing data and devising a plan to get that data into PulseApp. This seems to have involved Fujitsu.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, a fix is not expected to be available until the middle of next week. And it says at the end of this paragraph, it was decided by PNBA and myself that we would not communicate this wider at this stage, as we do not wish to raise concerns about Horizon integrity. Does that help at all with the context for this?
So I can't remember the issue specifically, but Fujitsu hosted PulseApp as well. Mm-hmm. And there was obviously a concern from Rod as part of this. But when I saw this in the pack, I really struggled to remember this particular incident.
Why would it be related to concerns about Horizon integrity?
So I can only assume, what Gary's written, and obviously from Rod, that because it's relating to data, that's all I can assume.
What did you think about the decision that this was not going to be communicated more widely, as they did not wish to raise concerns about Horizon integrity?
So as an IT person, and say this throughout my career, it is important to be transparent about issues. And I would always advocate that. There may be a point at which you want to understand an issue first before you communicate. And I can only assume that's been the discussion between, because I think this was from Gary, and it references P&BA, so I can only assume that's Rod as well.
Going back to page 1 of this document, please. And scrolling down a little, please. We can see you forwarding this on to Kevin Lenihan,
Mm-hmm.
copied to Dave Holbert and Rod Ismay on the 29th of September 2011. What was Mr. Lenihan's role?
So Kevin worked within service management, and he reported directly through to Dave Hulbert. He was located in Chesterfield, so he was quite close to Rod Ismay's area. So it would have been easy for him to pick this up and go into a lot of detail with Rod to understand what the issues were.
And you say this, Kevin, I would like you to pick up a piece of work on behalf of Rod and I. Rod has concerns that we are seeing a number of data issues, and the perception is that this is getting worse. Can you please work with one of Rod's team to qualify what these issues are? I would like to understand if we have any systemic issues. So what was your concern about this? Is this relevant to branch accounts or not?
I can't remember, but if there's, it obviously references transaction corrections. So there's obviously a piece of work needed to be done to ensure that the branch transactions were kept up to date and appropriate. So my concern would have been, it looks like a data issue. Can we get to the bottom of it, please, and understand what this is?
It appears, doesn't it, on the description as though it is an issue, whatever the issue is, which has affected branch accounts.
Yes.
Because there are transaction corrections which have been wrongly issued, which need to be reversed. What was your concern about the systemic issues or potential systemic issues?
And again, from an IT perspective, if there's a material issue with data, you need to understand what that issue is. So systemic, to me, is widespread.
Did this make you question the integrity of Horizon at all?
I can't remember. Sorry.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 00142676? Starting, please, towards the bottom of page 2 of this document. The email from Adrian Baker to you dated the 3rd of January 2012, and the subject is branch feedback. We can see from the top of the next page that Mr. Baker was head of strategy at the post office, and his email to you reads, Lesley, first of all, Happy New Year. Secondly, a quick bit of feedback question from my time in branch before Christmas. There seems to be a slight glitch with the quantity function, especially when used with stamps. It seems quite random as to whether the quantity selected follows the user into the next screen when selling loose stamps. Sometimes it does, sometimes not. On occasions, the quantity clears back to 1, but then when you select the stamp denomination, suddenly remembers the quantity. The feedback from St. Peter Street branch is that this is the single most common cause of losses in their branch. Can you have one of your teams investigate, please? Further up the page, please. You forward this on to Dave Hulbert on the 5th of January 2012, asking one of the team to take a look. Mr. Baker was raising a glitch in the quantity function which was affecting branch accounts, so causing losses is how he's put it. Did this cause you any concern?
I don't recall this email.
Looking at it now, do you connect this at all to concerns or questions about Horizon integrity?
So it could potentially be, or it could be a hardware fault. But it goes back to, if faults are investigated and if they're dealt with, that retains the integrity in the system.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 30096881? This is an email chain from August 2012.
Yeah.
It relates to apparent shortfalls at a branch totalling £18,000 over an 18-month period. And it was a case which was raised with you by Angela van den Bogert. Starting, please, on page 5 of this document. This is an email from, if we can just go back a page, please, to the bottom, contract admin team, the 2nd of August 2012. And it's to Anita Bravata. Someone called Trudy summarises the position in this way. Hi Anita, I rang the PM Jane at Semalong Post Office this morning just as an engineer had arrived at her branch. She explained that she has an ongoing problem with discrepancies at her branch for the last 18 months and you were aware of the situation. She said yesterday on position 3 there was less than £1,000 working cash. The clerk did a balance snapshot and was £170 over. She immediately did a printout and it was then showing as £700 under, so she knows there is a fault on the Horizon system. I agreed I would ring her back at 1 p.m. to see what the engineer had found out. I have just rang Jane back and she was so happy she said she could cry with relief. The engineer said there is a definite fault on the line, there was a bad noise on the line, and this was probably causing a loop. He said it may be caused by her pay station. He has changed the faceplate and the ADCL cable and is hoping this solves the problem. Horizon team will now keep an eye on it and may ring her to tell her to disconnect her pay station and then send her a new one. She has always known that the TCs were not hers, but has always settled centrally, a total of approximately £18,000 over the last 18 months. She has even had to cash in her pension to pay these off, and it now is asking for this money back. Can you advise how we go about seeing how much money this lady is due back, please? Going then to page 3 of this document. The email at the top of the page here is from Angela van den Bogert, is dated the 3rd of August 2012. And this is to Craig Tuthill and Lynn Norbury. And she says, Lynn, I have not, to my knowledge, been made aware of this branch previously, and their ongoing claims that discrepancies incurred were as a result of the Horizon system. The content of the email chain below has the potential to set hairs running before we properly understand what has gone on here and what the potential consequences are. Therefore, can I have, as a matter of urgency, the background on this branch, including the balancing records since the agent was appointed, TCs, MBSC and Horizon helpline logs, and all associated correspondence. I will flag this to the JFSA working group and in particular raise with Lesley Sewell in relation to the Horizon system. And then we can see at the top of page 2, please, Angela van den Bogen forwarding this to you, saying she's left a voicemail also, asking to discuss. And then page 1, please. Your email starting in the middle of the page. That's also dated the 3rd of August 2012, sent to Stephen Long, copied to Angela van den Bogert. And it says this: Stephen, can you help with this issue? It is obviously quite sensitive. The branch has had issues over a period of months and the engineer has just found a fault on the line. We would like a view on whether or not this type of fault would cause an issue of this nature. As you will see from the email, that this is to the tune of £18,000. Angela leading the investigation from Post Office. I realise this is probably outside of the usual process, but there is a nervousness around this one and the fact that the branch now believe the cause has been found. This is forwarded on, scrolling up please, to Gareth Jenkins by Stephen Long for a view. We can see that he's being asked to take a look. The matter is sensitive. He says, I have a very clear view on Lesley's question regarding the possibility of a network fault causing such discrepancies over a long period. However, you have far more knowledge and experience than me. What do you think? Were you concerned about the situation which was being brought to your attention? That is £18,000 of apparent shortfalls being reported over 18 months.
Yes, and that's why I raised it with the account executive.
The sub-postmaster in this case was convinced that the apparent shortfalls were caused by the system, but she had cashed in her pension to settle centrally up to this point. Did this give you any cause for concern in relation to the fact that this sub-postmaster had felt it necessary to settle centrally for apparent shortfalls which she was convinced were the fault of the system, not her?
So, yes, I would have been concerned about it.
Did you raise that aspect with anyone?
I can't recall exactly what I did or didn't because and I have looked at this and other documents within the park, because I couldn't understand why I'd copied Andy Garner. And unfortunately, I went off to have an operation straight after this, 2 days later. So after...
Do you need to take a break?
No, I'm okay. I clearly feel so bad for this postmaster.
Could you tell me who Stephen Long is?
So Stephen Long was the account executive at Fujitsu.
Right, I see. So it's not a name I come across. So he's Fujitsu.
Yeah, so I took this very serious. I can see I took this seriously when I read the email.
Yeah.
In the park, and I escalated it to my senior counterpart at Fujitsu to examine what had gone on here.
Well, that was my next question. He had the same kind of seniority at Fujitsu as you had at Post Office, yeah?
Yes, he did. And my regret with this is I don't know what happened out of it.
Yes, I follow that you've explained that. But thank you for telling me who Mr. Long was.
Thank you.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 302961? Starting, please, with page 4 of this document, towards the bottom of the page. There is an email from Gareth Jenkins to you, dated the 28th of June 2013. And Mr. Jenkins says, Lesley, the local suspense problem was first raised as a call on the Horizon Help Desk by MBSC at 4:51 p.m. on Monday, the 25th of February 2013. Problem diagnosed by Thursday, 28th of February, and a conference call held with Post Office Limited to brief them as to the issue and its scope. In your email reply above, dated the 3rd of July 2013, you ask for details of this call. I'm interested in the detail and who raised it. And then follow some further emails before a timeline is sent by Roderick Williams to you and Rod Ismay. So page 1, please. About halfway down the page. And this is copied to Andrew Wynne, Hugh Flemington, and Andrew Baker. And we can see from the timeline here, can't we, that the issue first came to the attention of the Post Office, the first bullet point here, specifically Post Office Finance Service Centre, on the 6th of February 2012, at the close of a branch trading period. Would you agree?
Yes.
And the events which followed were these. So the issue raised concerned the 9,799.88 discrepancy at the Willem branch. FSC might have proactively contacted sub-postmaster given the size of the discrepancy. FSC investigated, saw that it looked wrong and brought the account back to balance, i.e. zero, at no cost to the sub-postmaster. FSC would have monitored the Willem branch to see what happened the following month. Over the next few weeks, as the rest of the branch trading data for the same period was processed, the other 13 branch anomalies were noted. Those other branches' accounts were brought to balance again at no cost to the sub-postmaster. This was not perceived to be a significant issue given the small number of branches affected and the small sums involved. Then, on the 6th of February 2013, so a year later, the Willen sub-postmaster contacted Post Office Limited's National Business Support Centre to report the same discrepancy in his branch trading as the previous year. Over to the top of the next page. NBSC passed this on to Fujitsu between the 6th and the 8th of February 2013. Fujitsu then notified FSC of the problem on the 28th of February 2013. Fujitsu resolved B14 on the 25th of April 2013. So a full year later, we have this issue being reported by the same sub-postmaster to the NBSC. The post office knew about the suspense account bug for a full year before Fujitsu was informed about it. Is that right?
So post office were aware of, from what I understand, the FSC were aware of a discrepancy at that particular branch. It wasn't identified as a fault until a year later. So they weren't aware that it was a fault.
So they were aware of the impact?
But not that it was a fault until a year later. It wasn't found until a year later.
It appears that someone did not regard the issue as significant given the small number of branches affected. Do you know who it was who made that assessment?
I don't know who would have made that assessment.
Okay. Is this a reflection of the P2 grading system at the time, that something was only graded a P2, that is a significant incident, if a significant number of branches were affected? Or would that not have been being considered by FSC?
No, because the FSC would not determine whether it was a P1 or a P2. That would come into IT for them to understand what the issue was and what the impact was. As I understand it, FSC had obviously dealt with Willen Branch in, forgive me, 2012, yeah, and there was no issue found, so the discrepancy was written off, as I understand it. Once Willen Branch came back a year later and there was more detailed investigation, it was that point that we understood that there was a fault. I don't know when IT was involved, at which point. I don't know whether they were involved when the one branch raised the issue, but we were certainly involved, obviously, when there was more branches.
At the time, was there any guidance in place for the FSC as to when they should refer something either to IT within the post office or to Fujitsu?
I don't know the answer to that one, I'm sorry.
Had you been made aware of the suspense account bug before June 2013?
I was made aware of it once we understood it was a fault, so that would have been in 2013.
What was your reaction when you saw this timeline in July 2013?
It wasn't good. However, I think if there's one discrepancy in a big system, that's hard to find if there's a fault. And it was obviously investigated at the time and they couldn't find a fault. I think the main concern for me would have been to ensure that the branch was not disadvantaged, which they weren't.
Given that this had gone unidentified as a bug for a year, did you have any concern that there might have been branches affected that hadn't been identified?
The resolution, as I understood it, identified all branches that were affected.
That document can come down now, thank you. The third bug, which was referenced in the second site interim report, was the Falkirk bug. Do you recall becoming aware of that in the summer of 2023?
Only through the second site report.
The draft briefing note, which was prepared for Paula Vennells on the second site review into Horizon, which was dated the 2nd of July 2013, is a document you refer to at paragraph 18 of your statement. And that deals with this bug, the Falkirk bug. Could we have that on screen, please? The reference is POL 30029627. And page 5 of this document, please. Towards the bottom of the page, there is a heading, Other Anomalies, Falkirk. We'll come back to the terminology of anomalies in due course, but for now, focusing on the information being provided in this draft briefing. It's explained we are also aware of a further anomaly in Horizon which was considered in both criminal and civil court proceedings, the Falkirk anomaly. The Falkirk anomaly occurred when cash or stock was transferred between stock units. It was resolved in March 2006 and is therefore a different anomaly to either the 14 branch or 62 branch anomaly. So those other two were the receipts and payments mismatch bug and the suspense account bug, weren't they?
Yes.
The Falkirk anomaly was the subject of expert evidence in the MISRA criminal prosecution, where the defence expert asserted that its existence demonstrated Horizon had faults which could cause losses, and therefore that possibility could not be excluded in MISRA's case. And B, the prosecution expert Gareth Jenkins from Fujitsu asserted that it could not have been responsible for the losses because its clearly visible events had not manifested themselves in the branch records and that it had been fixed more than a year earlier. And then it goes on to explain the outcome of the MISRA case. And it also, at 32, refers to the Falkirk anomaly having been considered by the High Court in December 2006, January 2007, when a sub-postmaster, Lee Castleton, raised it as part of his defence to a debt recovery action for £23,000. The court found no evidence of the Falkirk anomaly in the branch. So on the basis of the information contained in this document, individuals within the post office knew about the Falkirk bug by at least late 2006, early 2007. Was that your understanding?
I can only assume that's correct.
Well, were you involved in creating this draft briefing? It was certainly sent to you.
Yes, part of it. So yes. Yeah.
Can you help at all with the work that you did relating to the second site review? So at this point in summer of 2013, with how high up knowledge of the Falkirk bug in 2006, 2007 went within the post office?
I don't know.
Can we have on screen, please, POL 001 05632? This is an email from Alwyn Lyons to Paula Vennells, copied to Martin Edwards, Mark Davies and Susan Crichton. It is dated the 23rd of May 2013, and the subject is James' brief. Just for context there, the James brief, was that referring to Lord Arbuthnot, who was then...
I assume it does, yes.
It reads as follows: Paula, the only things that is not in the brief for James is our move away from the there are no bugs in Horizon to there are known bugs in every computer system this size, but they are found and put right and no sub-postmaster is disadvantaged by them. It would be good to be able to go on and say or has been wrongfully suspended or prosecuted. I do not think that is a phone call conversation but needs to be aired at some point with James. I would suggest at your meeting. I should stress you're not on the copy list to this email, so you didn't receive it at the time. But drawing together the evidence from this morning on post office knowledge of bugs, errors, defects, or issues with the Horizon system, which could affect or might have affected balancing in branch. It seems that first, individuals within the post office knew of the Falkirk bug by at least late 2006, early 2007. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Second, there was post office knowledge of at least one receipts and payments mismatch bug by late 2010.
Yes.
You yourself, as post office head of IT, knew about the receipts and payments mismatch bug by at least March 2011.
Yes.
Individuals within the post office knew about the effects of the suspense account bug by February 2012, even if the cause was not known at that stage. And finally, issues relating to glitches in the quantity function affecting branch accounts and large unexplained shortfalls had been raised with you and others within the post office between September 2011 and August 2012.
Yes.
How can it be, therefore, that the public position of the post office up until May 2013 was there are no bugs in Horizon?
I don't know the answer to that, because from my perspective as an IT professional, I wouldn't say there are no bugs in any system, because you do, and I call them faults, not bugs. There are faults in computer systems, and it's important how you deal with them. So when I read this email, I couldn't understand it.
Were you aware that that was the position being put forward outside of the post office up until this point?
I don't recall what the position was at that time.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 001-07955? This is page 2 of this document, please. About halfway down the page is the first email in this chain from Mark Davies to Alwyn Lyons, Simon Baker, Susan Crichton, Martin Edwards, and you, among others. It is dated the 2nd of July 2013, and the subject is Daily Comms Call. Mr. Davies asks Nina to set up a daily comms call on the Horizon issue with all those copied and include Portland on it. If others need to be involved, please can colleagues suggest names. And then the email above this, towards the bottom of page 1, from Nina Arnott to those on the last circulation list, along with a few others, including Roderick Williams. This is also dated the 2nd of July 2013. And she says, no problem, Mark. I appreciate it's tricky with everyone's busy diaries, but in order to manage this reputational issue most effectively, our top priority will be to ensure everyone can attend one conference call a day for the next 4 working days, to ensure there is one forum for important decision-making about our communications approach as publication date draws near. The publication being referred to here, is that the publication of the Second Sight interim report?
I believe it is.
You then reply above, suggesting that Miss Arnott fixes this for the best time and you manage around it. Mm-hmm. And we can see a reply to you there from Nina. What was your role in relation to the formulation of the Post Office's public communications strategy about Horizon's integrity?
So I can't remember what involvement I did or didn't have at this stage, and I've looked at this email and I can't remember the meetings at the time. My input would have been in terms of commenting on drafts or documents. That's the best I don't even recall that, to be fair. That's what I would have done.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 00341348? Starting, please, towards the bottom of page 1. This is an email from Simon Baker to you and Alwyn Lyons, copied to Simon Baker himself. It is dated the 28th of June 2013, and the subject is Summary of Receipts, Payments, Problems. In his email, he sets out a timeline of events, and then at the top of page 2, please, under Problem Description, there is this: the problem occurs as part of the process of moving discrepancies into local suspense. There was a bug introduced as part of HNG that in certain circumstances meant that discrepancies were not properly cleared to local suspense. Going up then to the top of the first page of this document, please. You reply on the 29th of June 2013, saying this 2 lines down: can we change the reference from bug to fault? Before I ask you about that, I'd like to look at just one more document from the day before, and that's on the 28th of June 2013. Could we have on screen, please, POL 00296821? And this is an email from Alwyn Lyons to Mark Davies, Hugh Flemington, and you, copied to Roderick Williams and Jarnell Singh. Date 28th of June 2013, subject 14 bug wall. And Alwyn Lyons says, can we call bugs incidents from now on, please? Thanks, Alwyn. This appears to be a response from an email from Mark Davies below on the same day, which says, can we change the way we are referring to this, please, as a matter of urgency? Was this correspondence on the 28th of June why you suggested changing the reference from bug to fault in your email on the 29th of June?
I don't know. All I can say is that my whole career I've talked about faults and issues. I've never used the word bugs.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 00380985? This is an email from Mark Davies to Paula Venables, dated the 2nd of July 2013, and it's copied to you, among others. And the subject is computer, in quote marks, question. And Mr. Davies is responding to an email from Paula Venables of the same date. Just below, which says, my engineer computer literate husband sent the following reply to the question: what is a non-emotive word for computer bugs, glitches, defects that happen as a matter of course? Answer: exception or anomaly. You can also say conditional exception, anomaly, which only manifests itself under unforeseen circumstances. And Mr. Davies responds above, stating, I like exception very much, very helpful. What did you understand the concern to be about using the term bug?
I really didn't understand the concern about using the word bug or fault, because that's what they were.
Did you understand this to be driven by a desire to minimise the seriousness of identified bugs by using different language?
It appears that way.
At the time, was that something that occurred to you or not?
at the time, I thought it was, I just thought it was mad,
Why do you say that?
because they were false. They weren't, I wouldn't have classed them as anomalies. And yes, it changed the way in which we had to respond and communicate about them, but they were false.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 001 45100? This is an email from you to Martin Edwards, subject line JA meeting brief. Again, is that now Lord Arbuthnot?
Yes.
There's a reference to a meeting brief for Paula Venables ahead of that meeting. And you say this, Martin, just to be clear on the anomalies, these were not undiscovered issues. We brought them to Second Sight attention for completeness. Also, when Susan and I were crafting the briefing, we were careful in our wording as these were associated with potential losses to sub-postmasters in their trading statements. This was so that we could differentiate from other issues. A good example is the pin pads issue we had 3 years ago, which did get some publicity in the press. In addition, Rod is reviewing another issue he raised with us on Friday. Although he believes it did not affect sub-postmasters, I've asked him to double check. And you say we need to be careful in our comms not to indicate that we do not have anomalies or exceptions, as that is not the case. It's the context which is important, and in this case, the fact that they could and did affect trading statements. So just to understand the issues and separate them out in this, it appears that by this point you've adopted the terminology of anomalies or exceptions. Was that because of the correspondence we've just been to?
That's because we were asked to do that.
Okay.
But within IT, I would have still talked about faults.
So separately from the question of terminology, you appear here to be drawing the distinction between relevant bugs or faults or whatever you want to term them, and ones that you considered not to be relevant. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Can you explain which ones you thought were relevant?
Which ones were relevant?
So you've explained here, you've made a reference to the ones that could and did affect trading statements. So was that the point you were trying to make?
Yes, I was trying to make it really clear that they did affect sub-postmasters' trading statements, and this was with regard to the receipts and payments and the suspense fault, effectively.
Could we have on screen, please, POL?
Before we do, sorry, I may be chasing a hare here, which is unnecessary, but bear with me. There's been, what I think at the moment, some conflict in the evidence about exactly who it was drew the attention of Second Sight to these, I'll adopt your word, Ms. Sewell, faults. You write in this email, we brought them to SS attention for completeness. When you use the word we, can you remember who you were referring to then?
I think IT did.
So you think that someone in the IT department of the post office
Yes.
was the person or persons who actually alerted Second Sight to these bugs or faults?
Yes, I do.
Fine. All right. That's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. But as you know, Ms. Price, there's been not a degree of debate, but uncertainty about who said what to whom on this.
Of course, sir. Could we have on screen, please, POL 001 89880? And I appreciate, Ms. Sewell, this is a document that has been provided to you very recently, only this morning. Have you had a chance to read through this and the other two linked documents?
Very briefly.
We'll take it fairly slowly then. This is an email dated the 2nd of July 2013 from Mark Davies, Communications Director, to you and others. And it encloses a draft statement. It's called draft press, so it appears that it was a draft press statement. Is that right?
Yes.
Going to the attachment, POL 001-89881. And we can see there confidential draft post office statement on Horizon system. And this contains reference to the receipts and payments mismatch bug and the suspense account bug. 3 paragraphs up, please, from the bottom of the page. We see there the reference in that paragraph, 3 paragraphs up, to the 62 and the 14 branches affected. And the next paragraph underneath that says this: in the first of these cases, 17 sub-postmasters were adversely affected and later reimbursed to a total cost of XXX, with the highest payment being £115. In the second set of cases, the total impact was XXX. The accounting anomalies in these cases were picked up by the Horizon system. Post Office proactively informed sub-postmasters, and any losses, however minor, were reversed. That reference to the accounting anomalies being picked up by the Horizon system, that's not correct, is it, that both anomalies were picked up by the Horizon system? Because the suspense account bug was not recognised as a bug and reported to Fujitsu by the Post Office for a year after its effects were first reported. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
You provided comments on this draft statement. Could we have on screen, please, POL 00296993? We can see here an email from Ruth Barker on the same day, 2nd of July 2013. Here's the amended statement, which I think incorporates all comments and amends received so far. And it's to you and others. And scrolling down to the email below, please. A little further down, please. In the middle of the page there, we have an email from you dated the 2nd of July to Nina Arnott, Ruth Barker and others about the draft statement. And you say, Nina, Simon and I have gone through the detail with Ruth. She has our comments. And then scrolling back up to the version of the draft, which incorporates your comments, the 5th paragraph in the amended draft, starting the Horizon system. The last sentence in that says this evidence included, and there's a reference there to the provision of information to Second Sight, and after that the evidence included details 2 sets of transaction anomalies, one impacting 62 of the Post Office's 11,800 branches between March and October 2010, and the other affecting 14 branches with respect to accounting entries in 2010 to 11. In the first of these cases, 17 sub-postmasters were adversely affected and later reimbursed to a total cost of XXX pounds. In the second set of cases, the total impact was XXX. When the accounting anomalies in these cases were picked up by the Horizon system, the Post Office proactively informed sub-postmasters, and any losses, however minor, were reversed. So the change here seems to be to when the accounting anomalies were picked up in place of the anomalies were picked up by the Horizon system. Was that a change that you made to the wording?
So, having just seen this morning, I couldn't recall seeing this at the time. I obviously did see it, but I can't remember this.
Do you see the problem that still seems to be incorrect based on what we know about the suspense account bug?
Yes.
Is that something that you should have corrected at the time?
I can't remember reading it, and I can't remember the document, so I'm struggling with this. And I would have relied heavily on Simon as well to help me as part of this, because he was pulling together all the detail on a lot of the detail on these particular faults.
It's an important point, isn't it? Because if a bug can go unrecognised for a year, a bug which causes accounting discrepancies, the post office, which dismisses, prosecutes and seeks to recover debt from individuals on the basis of Horizon accounting data, might go on to take action against individuals wrongly before the bug is discovered as such, mightn't it?
It is an important point, but I would never intentionally leave anything out. Just wouldn't. It's fine.
Okay. Do you want to take a break?
No, I'm fine.
We're about to have a second
We
break.
are. So I was just going to suggest that we might
Yeah.
want to take our break there.
Yeah, we'll take 10 minutes now. So we'll return at 25 past.
Thank you, sir. Hello, sir.
Hi.
Ms. Sewell, just before we go back to the documents, in answer to a question from the chair earlier, you said you thought that someone from IT told Second Sight about the bugs. Can you help at all with who from IT that was?
I think it was Simon Baker.
Could we have back on screen, please, the document we were just looking at? POL 20296,993. And just looking at the draft, scrolling down a bit, please. Second paragraph on the page. Apologies, the first paragraph on the page, an interim review into concerns around the accuracy of the accounting programme used in post office branches has concluded there are no systemic issues inherent within the computer system. The point about Second Sight's confirming that there were no systemic issues in the computer system is a point that you raise at paragraph 49 of your statement. And I'd just like to explore that, please. That document can come down, thank you. I'd just like to explore that, please, from an IT perspective. In the context of bugs or defects affecting a computer system, isn't any bug or defect inherently systemic in that all branches run the same software, even if all branches are not affected by a bug?
So how I would look at it from an IT perspective, systemic would affect everybody. So it would be quite widespread. You do have in all systems, and I've seen it throughout my career, where you can have a fault which will affect just a small number of, in this case it's branches or accounts. You know, if I think about my banking background, So systemic to me is widespread.
Referring to the lack of a systemic issue using your definition of systemic there, it doesn't engage, does it, with the underlying point here, that there were bugs which could cause accounting discrepancies. One of the bugs referred to in the second site report went unrecognised as such for a year. There might well be other bugs in a system of this size and scale which occur. Would you agree with those propositions so far?
Yes.
And in those circumstances, how could Post Office say that its reliance on transaction data produced by Horizon to dismiss, to prosecute, to seek to recover debt from people had not caused the apparent losses which were the subject of challenge? We've seen in a number of places quite bold statements that the Horizon system had not caused the apparent losses which were the subject of Horizon challenges.
Yeah.
How was Post Office in a position to say that?
So, and I'll go back just from an IT perspective. For any fault or issue that is raised through whatever means it's raised, the important point to maintain the integrity of the data is to be able to identify it and rectify it. Now, that doesn't deal with potential issues that you can't see, because you're looking for something that you can't actually see. But it's important, and in these cases, these particular faults, even though one took a year to deal with, it was identified and it was corrected. And the original issue with the suspense one for the sub-postmaster, Willen, I think it was, the appropriate process control kicked in, because it can't just be about the system, it's got to be about the process as well.
Well, in that case, the Financial Services Centre had looked at it and spotted that something wasn't right. But do you recognise that there might be other cases which were or weren't on the radar of financial services, where there were apparent shortfalls, which weren't on Fujitsu's radar, which weren't on anyone's radar?
That could have been a possibility. But that then leads on to how you check for the integrity of the data. And I don't know whether we'll come on to that a little bit later. But that goes on to, well, what are the checks and balances in place as that data goes from the terminal to the data centre itself and the database?
Well, in the context of prosecutions, you will be aware of audit data requests that may have been made in support of some prosecutions. Mm-hmm. But were you aware that there were other prosecutions where no audit data was ever requested from Fujitsu?
Not to my knowledge.
I'd like to move, please, to the question of Gareth Jenkins and the evidence he gave in support of prosecutions brought by the Post Office. Could we have on screen, please, FUJ 001 56869? This is an email from Harvey Michael, Commercial Director and Solicitor at Fujitsu, to someone called Helen Lamb, and it's dated the 18th of September 2013. The subject here is summary of meeting with Post Office, and there is a list of attendees, and your name is on the list as attending. Mm-hmm. Having a look down the table that summarises that meeting, do you recall being at that meeting?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Going to point 7 from the summary, please, page 2. We have this. Post Office Limited's criminal barrister from Cartwright King Solicitors has flagged a discrepancy between the evidence given in court and the information provided as part of the second site audit. This could mean that the relevant expert is tainted. Then in the next column, we have I disagree that the expert is tainted, but ultimately there is little point challenging it, as we agree it may be a sensible time to transition to a new expert to ensure continuity of service. And then there's an action, SC to determine whether she can share the report with Fujitsu. You appear to have been told at this meeting that Post Office's criminal barrister from Cartwright King had formed the view that the expert, and that is Gareth Jenkins, was tainted because of a discrepancy between the evidence he'd given in court and the information provided to Second Sight. Were you aware at the time that this was Gareth Jenkins?
Yes, I was.
So you were aware of this opinion that had been given by the barrister from Cartwright King?
No, I was aware probably from Sue Crichton. I can't remember. I don't recall seeing any legal review that was done, but I was certainly aware from Susan.
Did this concern you at the time?
But yes, it would have concerned me at the time. I can't remember what the concerns were exactly, but it would have been about, because as I understood it, he hadn't disclosed all of the faults that he was aware of. I think that was the material issue.
Did anyone at this meeting, and I recognise that you're struggling to recall the meeting in particular, but did anyone from Fujitsu express concern about this?
I can't remember.
Could we have on screen, please, FUJ 00117284? This is a business review of the Post Office account dated the 17th of April 2015. Going to page 3, please. Under customer satisfaction, that bottom left box on the left-hand side, if we can scroll it, if we can zoom in a little, please. See the last bullet point here. Is Gareth Jenkins recognised by Lesley Sewell for impeccable service and individual contribution? So this is this the same Gareth Jenkins who had been described as a tainted expert in that meeting we've just looked at?
It will be.
Had it not negatively impacted upon your assessment of him?
So just by way of background with calling out individuals for any particular positive contribution to Post Office, it's highly likely, and I can assume that the inquiry will be able to find something that was given to me to call Gareth out for a particular reason.
Can you recall what that was now?
No, I really don't, and I can't actually recall. I think this was about 2015, was it? What month was it again? Sorry.
April, I think.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I really don't know.
Moving, please, to what has been termed remote access. We looked at, that document can come down now, thank you. We looked earlier this morning at a meeting note of a meeting in 2010 at which the receipts and payments mismatch bug and potential solutions for dealing with it were discussed. Could we have that back on screen, please? It's FUJ 3081945. And this is the meeting at which Mr. Trundle from your team, or from IT, was in attendance. Mm-hmm. And going to page 3, please. Under solution 1, we see that there are 3 potential solutions to apply to the impacted branches. The group's recommendation is solution 2 should be progressed, but one of the solutions being considered was solution 1. Alter the horizon branch figure at the counter to show the discrepancy. Fujitsu would have to manually write an entry value to the local branch account. Impact, when the branch comes to complete next trading period, they would have a discrepancy which they would have to bring to account. Risk, this has significant data integrity concerns and could lead to questions of tampering with the branch system and could generate questions around how the discrepancy was caused. This solution could have moral implications of Post Office changing branch data without informing the branch. Did Mr. Trundle or anyone else at this meeting or involved in discussions about this at the time report back to you that this was being contemplated?
I don't believe so.
This makes clear, doesn't it, that Fujitsu could insert data into the branch account without the branch's knowledge or approval?
Yes, it does.
Was that fact drawn to your attention at the time?
I don't believe it was.
Should it have been?
Because I wasn't dealing with the issue itself. So there's 2 parts to this. I wasn't dealing with the issue. I think given what we know now and at the time, it should have bubbled up and it should have gone all the way up to Mike Young.
But as head of IT, as you were at the time, was this not a material piece of information of which you should have been aware?
This was an operational incident that was being dealt with through a different line. And at the time I joined, my role was largely changed. It wasn't dealing with these issues. And Ian Trundle, it's likely Ian would be there just to support, with the reporting line going separately through Andy into Mike.
Setting aside the proposed solution, which we know wasn't in fact the solution which was recommended or adopted, the fact of the ability of Fujitsu to take the step that was being proposed, wasn't that something that you should have been told about as head of IT?
Probably, yes.
Going to, apologies, could we have on screen please POL 0014 1531. Going to page 2 of this document, please. Towards the bottom of the page is an email from Simon Baker to Steve Beddoe, copied to you. It is dated the 22nd of May 2013. The subject is branch database support team changes. And it reads as follows. Steve, Fujitsu tell me that very, very occasionally the support team are required to make updates directly to the branch database, presumably to fix support problems, and that when such a change is required, it is signed off by Post Office Limited using the service desk. Are you aware of this process? And if so, how do I get a log of all such requests? Thanks, Simon. The email above is from Simon, is to Antonio Jamasp from Simon Baker, 24th of May 2013. Antonio Jamasp was the person who sent the meeting invite to the 2010 Receipts and Payments Mismatch meeting, wasn't he? And he attended that meeting.
Yes.
And you're copied in here. And it says, Tony, I know you're still working on this. As I am out next week, can you keep Lesley in the loop as you get a clear picture on the processes we use to approve changes to live data and a list of the times this has happened? Also, Lesley is in Dean and Chesterfield on Thursday. If you're there, she would appreciate a quick conversation with you on this subject. So you were being told in this email chain that Fujitsu occasionally, or very, very occasionally, made updates directly to the branch database. Could we have on screen, please, FUJ 000-87027? This is an email from the 4th of June 2013 that appears from the context and the email below to be the American format for dates, because we see the email below is the 4th of June. So going up, please, to that top email. And you provide comment here on providing Second Sight with answers to their questions about remote access at the Bracknell site. Do you remember that issue?
I do.
And the questions being asked are set out further down this email chain. Page 2, please. Ian Henderson's email of the 3rd of June. There are a series of questions that are set out there, and then this in the penultimate paragraph underneath those. Please note that we're not really interested in what the procedures manual says about any of this. We need to look at whether it would be possible for a rogue employee to do what is alleged and what log files would be generated to record that activity. Please note that I have now been provided with a second batch of employee email, and I may find the other emails that are potentially relevant to this matter. You were aware at this time, weren't you, of the importance of this issue to the integrity of the Horizon audit data?
Yes, I was.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 00296-795? This is an email from Andrew Wynne to you and others, dated the 28th of June 2013. It provides a summary of the history of the receipts and payments mismatch issue. Attached to Mr. Wynne's email was the note of the 2010 receipts and payments mismatch meeting, at which the possible solution of Fujitsu altering the branch data was discussed. When this was sent to you, would you have read the attachments, the attached meeting note?
I don't know whether I would have read them. So I can't remember the document that I saw in the pack. That it didn't bring back any memories or anything, so I can't remember it.
You mean the 2010 meeting note?
Yes, the one you showed me earlier. Yeah.
Quite apart from the note of that meeting, you'd been made aware by this point of the fact that very, very occasionally Fujitsu would alter branch data, hadn't you, in that earlier email that we looked at?
So the earlier email we looked at, and again, I can't recall having a discussion with Tony or seeing the output from that email. It does reference data being changed on the databases, but I don't know what that was, whether it was transactional data or just, you can make general support changes on a database. So I really don't know. And I couldn't find anything in the documentation that was provided to see what the output of that was. I struggled to find anything.
That document can come down now, thank you.
When you say you struggled to find anything, just so I'm clear, are you talking about your struggle now, having read what's been sent to you,
Yeah.
or a struggle then, so to speak?
No, I struggle to see from the documentation that was provided by the inquiry Sewell,
Right. Yeah.
to see what the output of that was. But the only point I will add is that from the inquiry notes that were sent, because this was such a material issue, there was a meeting pulled together with Second Sight to discuss this particular point. And I was obviously in attendance at that meeting, and so was Fujitsu.
Hang on a minute. So there was a meeting in or about the end of June, early July. Is that when we're talking about 2013?
Yes, that's correct.
So there is a note of that meeting.
Yeah, fine. I just wanted to be clear what the witness was saying, that's all. Thank you.
The note of the 2010 meeting on receipts and payments mismatch, from that note it appears that Fujitsu was being upfront about the fact that it could alter branch data in the way that was being proposed. Would you agree, having read that note now?
It does, but I would counter that with the number of times I and others asked about remote data, and we were consistently given the same message, that it was not possible.
Could we have on screen, please, the Second Sight interim report? That's POL 3099063. And going to page 12, please. This is dealing with spot review SR5 relating to the Bracknell site allegation. Reference is made at paragraph 1.4 to an assurance given in a letter to Alan Bates in 2010, signed by Edward Davey MP, that there is no remote access to the system or to any individual branch terminals which would allow the accounting records to be manipulated in any way. So that's the quote underneath there. Over the page at 13, please. At 1.10b, 1.10 has said this review has shown, and at B, an email sent to a number of Post Office Limited employees in April 2011, including a member of the testing team in Bracknell, included the following comment: although it is rarely done, it is possible to journal from branch cash accounts. There are possible P and BA concerns about how this would be perceived and how disputes would be resolved. And then at 1.11, P and BA refers to production branch accounting, which is a team within Post Office Limited that is responsible for back office accounting system. At 1.12, Post Office Limited has told Second Sight that the comment noted above describes a method of altering cash balances in the back office accounting system, not Horizon. We note, however, that any changes to branch cash account balances in this way would be subsequently processed in Horizon using the transaction correction process. This would be notified to sub-postmasters and requires their consent in order for the TC to be processed. The TC process typically runs on an overnight basis and is necessary to ensure that the back office accounting system remains synchronized with the Horizon system. And at 13, Second Sight notes that this method of ultimately adjusting branch cash accounts in Horizon is similar but not identical to what was described by the sub-postmaster, albeit in an indirect rather than direct way. We have subsequently been told that none of the Post Office Limited employees working in Bracknell in 2008 had access to the back office accounting system. So Second Sight's understanding was clearly that the only way that branch cash accounts could be adjusted was through the back office accounting system of transaction corrections, which would be notified to sub-postmasters and required their consent. Would you agree?
Yes.
The email we looked at from May relating to the very, very occasional intervention of Fujitsu, did you understand that to mean that Fujitsu could alter the branch accounts? Now, I know you've drawn a distinction between fixing bugs, but I just want to be clear about this. Before Second Sight published in July, were you aware that Fujitsu employees, not P&BA, had the ability to alter branch accounts?
To the best of my recollection, I didn't think that was the case. That wasn't until the Deloitte report, which was a year later.
Could we have on screen, please, POL 001 08538? About halfway down the page is an email from James Davidson from Fujitsu, and this is dated the 17th of April 2014. It is sent to Roderick Williams. The subject is strictly private and confidential, subject to privilege. Mr. Davidson is providing responses to a series of questions which had been posed by Roderick Williams. Going over the page, please, to question 2. The question is, can Fujitsu change branch transaction data without a sub-postmaster being aware of the change? And the answer is, once created, branch transaction data cannot be changed. Only additional data can be inserted. If this is required, the additional transactions would be visible on the trading statements, but would not require acknowledgement/approval by a sub-postmaster. The approval is given by Post Office via the change process. In response to a previous query, Fujitsu checked last year when this was done on Horizon Online, and we found only one occurrence in March 2010, which was early in the pilot for Horizon Online and was covered by an appropriate change request from Post Office and an auditable log. For old Horizon, a detailed examination of archived data would have to be undertaken to look at this across the lifetime of use. This would be a significant and complex exercise to undertake and discussed previously with Post Office, but discounted as too costly and impractical. Were you aware of this information in April 2014, at the time that this email was sent?
It was I think, so the Deloitte report was April, May. And at that point, it came very clear to me that Fujitsu had actually inserted the transaction into a branch trading statement.
We'll come on to the Deloitte report in a moment, which is May 2014. The information here from Fujitsu, directly from Mr. Davidson, did anyone raise that with you in April 2014?
I don't recall it being raised with me, and if it had been raised with me, I wouldn't intentionally not share that sort of information because it's quite important.
This is another document, isn't it, which suggests that Fujitsu was being upfront about what was and wasn't possible in relation to changing branch transaction data. Would you agree?
Yes, it is.
In May 2014, the Project Zebra draft report for discussion was produced. And you say at paragraph 53 of your statement that you were heavily involved in Project Zebra. Is
Yes,
that
I
right?
was.
Ahead of the publication of the report, the work being done by Deloitte was discussed at a Post Office Limited board meeting on the 30th of April 2014. Could we have the minutes of that meeting on screen, please? I promise, sir, this will be brief before lunch. The reference is POL 001-50285. And you see here minutes 30th of April 2014, Post Office Limited board meeting. And on the first page, we can see you were in attendance, scrolling down a bit, please, as Chief Information Officer to address a particular issue, so brackets minute 1455. And going then, please, to page 6 of this document, the heading Horizon Deloitte Report. And at A, the board welcomed Lesley Sewell, Chief Information Officer, and Gareth James, partner Deloitte, to the meeting. Chris Ojard also rejoined the meeting. And then at C to E, the minutes say this. Lesley Sewell explained that the first piece of work Deloitte had been asked to undertake was to give assurance that the control framework, including the security and processes for changes in the system, were robust from an IT perspective. Gareth James reported that all of the work to date showed that the system had strong areas of control and that its testing and implementation were in line with best practice. Work was still needed to assure the controls and access at the Finance Service Centre. And at E, Chris Ojard explained that several of the sub-postmasters who were challenging Horizon had made allegations about phantom transactions which were non-traceable. Assurance from Deloitte about the integrity of the system records log would be very valuable. Were the discussions summarised here at C to E referring to work on remote access? Or not?
I think E in particular, yes.
So if that's a convenient moment, I suggest we might want to break for lunch now.
All right. Well, just one more question from me. A little while ago, you told me that you were consistently being told that remote access was not possible, but I wasn't clear whether the persons telling you that that was the case were post office personnel or Fujitsu personnel or both.
It was both.
It was both. And those were in direct conversations?
From what I recall, yes. So on one side, post office, the architects team, and I think there's documentation in the inquiry pack where you can see emails where I've been given consistent messaging as well.
And given that you didn't begin at the post office until, I think it's April 2010, this, just so I can be clear, was this in the period between April 2010 and the publication of the second site interim report? Or was it a wider period even than that, in the sense that it went beyond the period it went beyond the date of the publication of the second site report?
So to the best of my recollection, I think it went beyond the second site report because we were trying hard to get to the bottom of the Bracknell issue with the testing.
Yeah, all right. What time should we start again there, Ms. Price?
2 o'clock, sir. It's only just past 1 o'clock now.
Fine, yeah, 2 o'clock.
Thank you.